The cargo ship Meridian drifted silently through the void when the first energy beam struck its hull. Captain Sarah Chen barely had time to grip her command chair before 3 massive vessels materialized around them, their sleek forms crackling with unknown technology. "Unknown vessel, you will surrender immediately," came the transmission in perfect English, though the voice carried an otherworldly resonance that made everyone on the bridge shiver. Sarah exchanged glances with her crew. They were a simple merchant vessel carrying supplies to the outer colonies, nothing that should interest anyone, let alone aliens. "This is Captain Chen of the merchant vessel Meridian. We're carrying humanitarian supplies to..." Silence. The voice cut through her words like a blade. "You carry contraband materials. Prepare to be boarded." The chief engineer, Marcus Webb, frantically checked his instruments. "Captain, our cargo manifest is clean. Medical supplies, food rations, educational materials, nothing illegal anywhere in known space." Before Sarah could respond, the ship shuddered as docking clamps engaged with impossible precision. The aliens were already aboard. The bridge doors hissed open, and 3 figures entered that defied every expectation Sarah had about first contact. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with elongated limbs and skin that seemed to shift between silver and deep purple. Their faces were hauntingly beautiful yet utterly alien, with large eyes that held an intelligence both ancient and terrifying. The center figure wore what appeared to be ceremonial armor, adorned with symbols that hurt to look at directly. When she spoke, her voice resonated with authority that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the soul. "I am Queen Zephyria of the Dominion Fleet. Your species has committed an act of war against our empire." Sarah felt her mouth go dry. Humanity had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago and had been careful to avoid any aggressive actions toward other species. "Your Majesty, there must be some mistake. Humanity has no quarrel with your people. We've never even encountered your species before." Queen Zephyria's eyes narrowed, and she gestured to one of her subordinates, who produced a small device that projected a hologram. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she recognized what appeared to be pages from an old book, the text glowing with an eerie light. "This," the Queen said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "was discovered in one of our sacred archives 3 cycles ago. It details military strategies, tactical formations, and warfare techniques that have been used against our forces with devastating effect. Our enemies have studied this text and used its wisdom to defeat our armies in 12 separate star systems." Sarah stared at the projection, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The text appeared to be in an ancient Earth language, possibly Chinese, but the formatting and style looked familiar in a way that made her stomach churn with dread. "Someone from your species," Queen Zephyria continued, "authored this manual of warfare that has cost the lives of millions of my people. The tactical genius displayed in these pages is beyond anything we have encountered in our 10,000 years of expansion across the galaxy." The Queen stepped closer, her presence filling the bridge with an almost physical weight. "Your species will answer for this act of aggression. But first I will have the name of the author. Someone among you created this weapon of words, and they will face judgment before the Dominion Council." Sarah's mind raced. Ancient Chinese military text that had somehow found its way into alien hands and been used against them? It sounded impossible, yet the evidence was right there in the hologram. "Your Majesty," Sarah began carefully, "humanity has many ancient texts on warfare and strategy. They were written thousands of years ago for conflicts on our home planet. We had no knowledge that any of our historical documents had reached other species." Queen Zephyria's expression darkened. "Ignorance is not absolution, Captain. This text has been translated and distributed among the rebellion forces in the Andromeda sector. They call it the art of war and treat it as if it were divine scripture. My generals, trained in warfare for centuries, have been outmaneuvered by primitives following the strategies outlined in these pages." The magnitude of the situation began to dawn on Sarah. Somehow one of humanity's oldest military texts had become a weapon against an advanced alien civilization. The irony would have been amusing if not for the fact that it might lead to the extinction of her species. "I want the author," Queen Zephyria declared, her voice echoing through the bridge. Bring them before me so they can answer for the chaos their words have unleashed across my empire. Until then, your vessel and crew are prisoners of the Dominion." As force fields shimmered into existence around each crew member, Sarah realized that humanity's first contact with an alien civilization had just become its first diplomatic crisis. Somewhere in the vast archives of human history lay the key to either their salvation or their doom. And she had no idea how to explain that the author they sought had been dead for over 2,000 years. The detention cell aboard the Dominion flagship was larger than Sarah had expected, though the walls seemed to pulse with an energy that made her skin crawl. Her crew sat around her, whispering among themselves as they tried to process what had happened. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's cultural specialist, was the first to break the heavy silence. "Captain, I think I know what text the Queen was referring to." Her voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might summon their captors. Sarah turned to her. Elena had been with the Colonial Service for 15 years and had an extensive background in human history and literature. If anyone could make sense of this situation, it would be her. "The Art of War," Elena continued, written by Sun Tzu around 500 BCE. It's one of the most influential military strategy texts in human history. The tactical principles are still taught in military academies across Earth and the colonies. Marcus laughed bitterly. "You're telling me that a 2,500-year-old book from ancient China is responsible for starting an interstellar war?" "It's not just any book," Elena replied, her academic enthusiasm breaking through despite their dire circumstances. Sun Tzu's strategies revolutionized warfare. The concepts of deception, knowing your enemy, winning without fighting, using terrain to your advantage, these ideas were centuries ahead of their time. Even today, business schools teach Sun Tzu's principles. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. If the Queen's people have been fighting for 10,000 years using conventional methods, and suddenly their enemies start employing advanced psychological warfare and strategic deception, it would be like bringing machine guns to a sword fight. Marcus finished grimly. The cell door materialized open without warning, and Queen Zephyria entered with 2 guards whose armor seemed to bend light around them. The Queen's earlier rage had been replaced by something far more dangerous: cold curiosity. "I have been consulting with my war council," she announced, her alien features unreadable. "The text you call The Art of War has been analyzed by our greatest military minds. The strategic depth displayed in its pages suggests an author of extraordinary intelligence and experience." She gestured, and a holographic display appeared showing star maps marked with battle sites. "In the Kepler uprising, our enemies used the principle your author calls appearing weak when strong. They feigned retreat, drew our fleets into an ambush, and destroyed 3 of our battle groups. In the Vega Rebellion, they employed all warfare is based on deception, creating false intelligence that led us into 7 separate traps." Elena spoke up, her voice steady despite the alien queen's intimidating presence. "Your Majesty, the author you seek was named Sun Tzu. He was a Chinese general and philosopher who lived on our home planet over 2,000 years ago." Queen Zephyria's eyes blazed with an inner fire. "Impossible. The tactical innovations in this text are too advanced for a primitive species that has barely achieved interstellar travel. This Sun Tzu must be alive, must be directing the rebellions against my empire." "I'm afraid that's impossible," Sarah interjected. "Sun Tzu died centuries before my species even developed written language for most of our planet. The text has been studied and preserved throughout our history, but the man himself has been dead for millennia." The Queen's expression shifted through several emotions that didn't quite translate to human features. Confusion, anger, and something that might have been fear flickered across her face. "You claim this tactical genius has been dead for thousands of your years, yet his strategies are being employed against my forces with perfect precision. How do you explain this contradiction?" Dr. Vasquez cleared her throat. "Your Majesty, might I ask how the text came to be in your archives?" "It was discovered on a derelict vessel in the neutral zone. Our scholars translated it and filed it away as a curiosity. Ancient writings from a species we had never encountered. We thought nothing of it until the rebellions began employing its strategies with devastating effect." Sarah's mind began working through the implications. "The rebels must have somehow accessed your archives and discovered the text themselves. They're not receiving Instructions from some living human strategist. They're simply reading and applying the same ancient wisdom that's been available to anyone on Earth for centuries. Queen Zephyria was silent for a long moment, her alien features processing this information. When she spoke again, her voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. You are saying that this Sun Tzu's intelligence was so great that his words alone, without his presence, without his direct command, can guide warriors he never met in battles he never imagined, against enemies he never knew existed. Elena nodded. That's exactly what we're saying. Sun Tzu didn't just write about tactics, he wrote about the fundamental nature of conflict itself. The principles are universal because they're based on understanding psychology, logistics, and the basic realities of warfare that exist regardless of technology or species. The Queen turned and paced to the far wall of the cell, her movements graceful despite her imposing size. If what you say is true, then this Sun Tzu was perhaps the greatest military mind in galactic history. A strategist so brilliant that his thoughts alone could topple empires thousands of years after his death. She turned back to face them, and Sarah saw something new in the alien Queen's expression, a mixture of awe and terrifying possibility. I have a new demand, Queen Zephyria declared. I want to meet this Sun Tzu. Sarah stared at Queen Zephyria in disbelief. Your Majesty, I think you misunderstood. Sun Tzu is dead. He's been dead for over 2,000 years. We cannot arrange a meeting with someone who died before your empire likely even existed. The Queen's expression hardened, and the temperature in the cell seemed to drop several degrees. Captain Chen, my empire spans 47 star systems. We have technology that can manipulate time, space, and the fabric of reality itself. When I say I want to meet someone, I am not limited by your primitive understanding of mortality. Elena stepped forward cautiously. Are you suggesting time travel? I am suggesting, the Queen replied with deadly calm, that your species will find a way to make this happen. Your ancient strategist has cost me 12 worlds and millions of lives. I will have answers, and I will have them from the source. Marcus spoke up from where he sat against the wall. Even if we had time travel technology, which we don't, changing the past could destroy everything we know. The temporal paradoxes alone. Queen Zephyria cut him off with a gesture. Then you will find another way. Perhaps your species has preserved more than just his writings. Memory engrams, genetic material, something that can be reconstructed. Sarah felt the weight of impossible expectations settling on her shoulders. Your Majesty, we're merchant sailors, not scientists or historians. We don't have access to advanced resurrection technology because, frankly, it doesn't exist. Then what would you suggest, Captain? The Queen's voice carried an edge that made everyone in the cell tense. My war council is demanding I glass your home planet as retaliation for the damage your ancient strategist has caused. The only thing preventing that order is my curiosity about this Sun Tzu. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Earth, with its billions of inhabitants, was under threat because of a book written before the Roman Empire reached its peak. The absurdity of it would have been laughable if not for the very real danger they faced. Elena suddenly straightened, her eyes bright with an idea. Captain, what if we can't bring Sun Tzu to her, but we can bring her to Sun Tzu? What do you mean? Sarah asked. The Queen wants to understand how one man's thoughts could be so powerful that they continue to shape warfare across the galaxy. She wants to meet the mind behind the art of war. What if we could show her everything we know about Sun Tzu? His life, his philosophy, his complete works. Elena turned to address Queen Zephyria directly. Your Majesty, Sun Tzu was more than just a military commander. He was a philosopher who understood that the greatest victory comes from winning without fighting. His strategies weren't just about defeating enemies, they were about understanding the nature of conflict itself. The Queen listened with an intensity that was almost predatory. Continue. On Earth, we have extensive historical records, archaeological sites, and scholarly analysis spanning centuries. We've studied not just what Sun Tzu wrote, but how he thought, why his ideas were revolutionary, and how they've been applied throughout human history. Sarah began to understand Elena's plan. You're proposing we take her to Earth. More than that, Elena replied. We show her the complete picture, the historical context that created Sun Tzu, the wars he fought, the culture that shaped his thinking. She wants to meet the man. We show her everything about the man and his world. Queen Zephyria was quiet for a long moment, her alien features unreadable. When she spoke, her voice carried a note of intrigue. You would show me your homeworld? The birthplace of this tactical genius? If it would prevent a war between our species, Sarah said. Yes. We'd share everything we know about Sun Tzu and human military history. And you believe this would satisfy my need to understand how one individual could threaten my empire from beyond the grave? Elena nodded enthusiastically. Your Majesty, Sun Tzu's genius wasn't supernatural, it was observational. He understood universal principles of conflict that apply regardless of technology or species. Once you understand his methodology, you'll see how to counter the strategies being used against your forces. The Queen began pacing again, her movements betraying deep thought. My analysts have been treating these tactics as inexplicable phenomena. You suggest they are simply the application of logical principles? Exactly, Elena confirmed. Sun Tzu wrote that if you know your enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. The rebels using his strategies have studied your forces and found weaknesses. But once you understand their methods, we can turn their own strategies against them. Queen Zephyria finished, her voice carrying a note of growing excitement. Show me, Dr. Vasquez. Show me this world that created such a mind and help me understand how to defeat an enemy who uses his teachings. Sarah felt a glimmer of hope for the first time since their capture. Does this mean you'll spare Earth? Queen Zephyria fixed her with a stare that seemed to pierce through her soul. That will depend entirely on what I learn about your Sun Tzu, Captain. If his wisdom can help me reclaim my empire, then your species may yet prove valuable allies. If not, she left the threat unfinished, but the implication was clear. Humanity's survival now depended on their ability to explain how a Chinese philosopher from the ancient world had become the greatest military threat the Dominion had ever faced. The journey to Earth took 6 days aboard the Dominion flagship Sovereign's Will, a vessel so massive that the Meridian looked like a toy boat in its docking bay. Sarah spent most of the time in the ship's guest quarters, which were luxurious by human standards but felt alien in ways that made her constantly on edge. Queen Zephyria had assigned them a liaison officer named Commander Vex, whose shorter stature and more human-like features made communication easier. Through Vex, they learned that the Dominion Empire had been expanding for over 10 millennia, conquering or absorbing thousands of species. The current rebellions represented the first time their military had faced systematic defeat. The Queen is frustrated, Vex explained as they sat in what passed for a conference room. Our species evolved from apex predators. We understand direct confrontation, superior firepower, overwhelming force. These new tactics confuse our instincts. Elena looked up from the historical documents she'd been compiling. That's exactly why Sun Tzu's strategies are so effective against you. He wrote about winning through indirect action, using your enemies' strength against them, avoiding their strong points while attacking their weaknesses. Our forces expect honorable combat, Vex continued. When enemies retreat, we pursue. When they appear weak, we attack. These responses have served us well for thousands of years. And now your enemies feign retreat to lead you into ambushes, Sarah observed. They appear weak to make you overextend your forces. Sun Tzu called it appearing strong when weak and weak when strong. Marcus, who had been quiet during most of the journey, suddenly spoke up. Commander, how did human military philosophy even reach the rebel forces? Vex's features shifted in what might have been embarrassment. The text was discovered during our conquest of the Helix Nebula colonies. A human research vessel had crashed on an uninhabited world centuries ago. Our archaeologists recovered its databanks as routine procedure. And someone just filed it away in your archives? Elena asked incredulously. Cultural artifacts from conquered species are standard administrative procedure. Millions of documents, artworks, and philosophical texts are cataloged annually. This particular text was classified as primitive military doctrine and stored in the General Archives. Sarah shook her head. Where any rebel group with archive access could find it. The irony is not lost on us, Vex admitted. The very thoroughness of our cultural preservation protocols provided our enemies with their most effective weapon. As Earth grew larger in the viewports, Sarah felt a mixture of pride and terror. The blue marble hanging in space looked so peaceful, so vulnerable. The Dominion fleet following them could reduce it to ash within hours. Captain, Vex said softly. I should inform you that the Queen has studied your species' military history during the journey. She is impressed by your capacity for warfare despite your technological limitations. What do you mean? Elena asked. Your world wars, the scale of destruction achieved with primitive weapons, the complexity of the strategies employed. The Queen believes humans may be naturally gifted warriors. She sees Sun Tzu not as an anomaly, but as a representative of your species' potential. Sarah felt a chill. That could be good or very, very bad. Indeed, Vex agreed. If the Queen decides humanity represents a threat. He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. First contact was balanced on a knife's edge, and everything depended on how Queen Zephyria interpreted what they were about to show her. The landing site was carefully chosen, a remote area near the ancient battlefield of Tianshan, where scholars believed Sun Tzu might have commanded forces over 2,000 years ago. The Chinese government had been remarkably cooperative once they understood the stakes, though Sarah suspected they were still trying to process the fact that their ancient military classic had nearly started an interstellar war. Queen Zephyria emerged from her transport wearing environmental armor that allowed her to breathe Earth's atmosphere. Her first act was to kneel and touch the soil with one gauntleted hand. This world created the mind that has humbled my empire, she said, her voice carrying across the battlefield through external speakers. I can feel the weight of history in this place. Dr. Li Wei, Earth's foremost expert on Sun Tzu, approached nervously. He was a small elderly man who looked impossibly fragile next to the 8-foot alien queen. Your Majesty, this region has seen countless battles throughout human history. Sun Tzu would have understood that warfare is ultimately about the human condition, our fears, our pride, our need to protect what we value. Queen Zephyria stood and fixed Dr. Li with her penetrating gaze. Tell me about this human condition, scholar. How does it create minds capable of such strategic brilliance? Dr. Li straightened, his academic passion overcoming his fear. Sun Tzu lived during China's Warring States period, a time of constant conflict between rival kingdoms. He understood that endless warfare was destructive and sought ways to achieve victory with minimal loss of life. His philosophy emphasized that the supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Without fighting? The Queen's voice carried skeptical surprise. How can one achieve victory without combat? Through superior preparation, intelligence gathering, psychological warfare, and strategic positioning, Elena interjected. Sun Tzu believed that battles are won before they're fought, through planning and understanding. Queen Zephyria was silent for a long moment, her alien features processing this concept. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been revelation. You are telling me that this Sun Tzu sought to win wars by avoiding the very nature of war itself. The ancient military academy in Beijing had been hastily prepared for the most unusual lecture in human history. Queen Zephyria sat in a specially reinforced chair as Dr. Li Wei presented a comprehensive analysis of Sun Tzu's strategic philosophy, while holographic displays showed battle formations and tactical movements. The art of war consists of 13 chapters, Dr. Li explained, his initial nervousness replaced by scholarly enthusiasm. Each chapter builds upon the last, creating a comprehensive framework for understanding conflict. But the core principle underlies everything. Win without fighting when possible, fight only when victory is assured. Queen Zephyria leaned forward, her alien features intent. This contradicts everything my species understands about warfare. We believe in honorable combat, testing strength against strength. And that's exactly why Sun Tzu's strategies have been so effective against your forces, Elena added from where she sat with the other humans. Your enemies know you'll respond predictably to certain stimuli. They're using your honor against you. Show me, the Queen commanded. Dr. Li activated a holographic display showing the recent Battle of Kepler Station. Your fleet outnumbered the rebel forces 3-1. According to the battle reports, they retreated when you engaged, drawing your ships away from the space station. Standard cowardice, Queen Zephyria said dismissively. We pursued to finish them. But Sun Tzu wrote all warfare is based on deception, Dr. Li continued. The retreat was not cowardice, it was strategy. They drew your forces away from your supply lines, then used hidden ships to attack your rear while your main fleet was out of position. The Queen's expression darkened as the tactical display showed exactly how her forces had been outmaneuvered. They sacrificed the appearance of honor to achieve strategic advantage. From Sun Tzu's perspective, honor that leads to unnecessary death is no honor at all, Dr. Li explained gently. He believed the highest form of warfare was to disrupt the enemy's plans before they could act, to win through intelligence rather than bloodshed. Sarah watched Queen Zephyria process this information, seeing the alien monarch struggle with concepts that challenged her species' fundamental worldview. The Queen stood and paced to the window overlooking Beijing's skyline. "On my homeworld we have a saying," she said finally. "The greatest warrior faces his enemies with courage and dies with dignity." "You suggest that the greatest warrior never faces his enemies at all?" "Not never," Dr. Li corrected. Sun Tzu wrote extensively about actual combat tactics, but he believed that if you must fight, it should be from a position of overwhelming advantage with victory assured before the first shot is fired. Marcus spoke up from his seat. "Your Majesty, think about it from a practical standpoint. Your empire spans dozens of worlds. Every time you lose ships and soldiers in unnecessary battles, you weaken your ability to protect what you've built." Queen Zephyria turned from the window, her expression thoughtful. "The rebellions have been costly. We have lost more ships in the past year than in the previous century of expansion. Because you're fighting on their terms," Elena explained. "They're using Sun Tzu's principles to force you into disadvantageous engagements. They attack where you're weak, avoid where you're strong, and use your predictable responses against you." "Then how do I counter these strategies?" the Queen asked, and Sarah heard genuine curiosity in her voice for the first time. Dr. Li smiled. "By learning from Sun Tzu yourself. If your enemies are using deception, you must become unpredictable. If they're avoiding your strengths, you must create new strengths where they don't expect them. If they're exploiting your honor code, you must develop flexible ethics that serve your people's survival." The Queen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight of realization that seemed to fill the room. "You are suggesting that to defeat an enemy using the art of war, I must become a student of the art of war myself." "Exactly," Elena confirmed. "Sun Tzu's greatest lesson isn't any specific tactic. It's the importance of understanding your enemy better than they understand themselves. Once you truly comprehend their methods, you can anticipate their moves and counter them." Queen Zephyria returned to her chair, her massive form settling with surprising grace. "I came to this world seeking revenge against a dead strategist. Instead, I find that this Sun Tzu may be the key to saving my empire." She fixed Dr. Li with her penetrating stare. "I want to learn everything. Every principle, every strategy, every philosophical nuance. If my enemies have made the art of war their scripture, then I will become its most devoted student." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The immediate threat to Earth seemed to be passing, but she was beginning to realize they might be creating something far more complex. An alien empire armed with humanity's greatest military wisdom. "Your Majesty," she said carefully, "Sun Tzu's teachings come with great responsibility. The power to win without fighting is also the power to achieve total victory through minimal effort." Queen Zephyria's alien features shifted into what might have been a smile. "Captain Chen, I begin to understand why your species produced such a strategic mind. You think not just about immediate victory, but about the consequences of that victory." She stood and addressed the room. "I have made my decision. The threat against your homeworld is withdrawn. Instead, I propose an alliance. Your species will help my empire understand and implement Sun Tzu's principles, and in return humanity will gain the protection and technology of the Dominion." Elena looked stunned. "You're offering us membership in your empire?" "I am offering you partnership," the Queen corrected. "Sun Tzu taught that the supreme excellence consists in subduing the enemy without fighting. Perhaps the supreme wisdom consists in making allies without conquest." 3 months later, Sarah stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned Sun Tzu, a hybrid vessel that combined human tactical systems with Dominion technology. Through the viewport she could see the rebel stronghold of Terminus Prime, a fortress built into an asteroid that had withstood every Dominion assault for the past 2 years. "All ships report ready," came the voice of Commander Vex from the tactical station. The alien officer had become something of a student himself, spending hours studying human military history alongside Queen Zephyria's other commanders. Remember, Elena said from her position as strategic advisor, Sun Tzu taught that the highest form of warfare is to attack the enemy's strategy itself, not their soldiers. Queen Zephyria, who had insisted on personally commanding this operation, stood at the center of the bridge wearing a modified version of her ceremonial armor. Over the past months, she had absorbed the art of war with an intensity that sometimes worried Sarah. The alien queen had not just learned Sun Tzu's strategies, she had begun to think like him. Open a channel to Terminus Prime, the queen commanded. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a scarred human face that Sarah recognized from intelligence briefings. General Rodriguez had been one of Earth's finest military commanders before disappearing into the outer territories. He was also the rebel leader who had first discovered Sun Tzu's writings in the Dominion archives. Queen Zephyria, Rodriguez said with a mocking smile. Come to throw more ships against our defenses? We've studied your people's tactics for years now. You can't break us with brute force. Indeed, General, the Queen replied calmly, which is why I have not come to attack your fortress. Rodriguez's expression shifted to confusion. Then why are you here? To offer you a choice, Queen Zephyria continued. You have used the wisdom of Sun Tzu to great effect against my forces. But tell me, General, have you read Chapter 3 of The Art of War? Sarah saw uncertainty flicker across the rebel leader's face. She knew what the Queen was doing. Chapter 3 dealt with the importance of knowing when to fight and when to seek alternative solutions. Of course I've read it, Rodriguez replied, but his voice carried less confidence than before. Then you know Sun Tzu wrote that the supreme excellence consists in subduing the enemy's resistance without fighting, the Queen continued. You also know he taught that prolonged warfare is never in the best interests of any nation. What's your point? Rodriguez demanded. Queen Zephyria smiled, a sight that was both beautiful and terrifying. My point, General, is that you have been an excellent student of Sun Tzu's tactical teachings, but you have missed his deeper wisdom. You fight to resist tyranny, to free your people from Dominion rule. But what if I told you that your rebellion has already achieved its purpose? She gestured, and the display showed star charts marked with recent changes in Dominion policy. Because of your resistance, I have reformed our expansion protocols. No more forced conquest, no more cultural suppression. The Dominion now offers partnership rather than domination to new species. Rodriguez stared at the display, processing what he was seeing. You're lying. This is some kind of trick. If it were a trick, Elena interjected, appearing on the split screen from her position on the bridge, would I be here as a free human advising Queen Zephyria? Would Earth remain unconquered and autonomous? Sarah watched as the rebel leader's face went through a series of emotions. Rodriguez was a brilliant strategist, but he was also human enough to be surprised when his enemy acted contrary to expectations. You want us to surrender, Rodriguez said finally. I want you to win, Queen Zephyria replied, causing shocked silence on both sides of the transmission. Sun Tzu taught that the greatest victory is achieving your objectives without unnecessary conflict. Your objective was freedom for your people. I am offering you that freedom, along with the technology and resources of the Dominion in exchange for partnership. Rodriguez looked around his command center, clearly consulting with advisors off-screen. When he turned back, his expression was cautious but interested. What kind of partnership? The same kind I have established with Earth, the Queen explained. Autonomous governance of your territories, shared defensive responsibilities, and mutual assistance in development and expansion. Your people keep their freedom and gain the benefits of our alliance. Sarah found herself holding her breath. This was the moment where Sun Tzu's philosophy would either prove its worth or reveal its limitations. Could ancient wisdom really end a war that had cost millions of lives? And if we refuse? Rodriguez asked. Queen Zephyria's expression remained calm. Then you will continue to fight a war that you have already won. Your resistance forced me to change my empire's fundamental approach to expansion. Continuing to fight now serves no strategic purpose and risks everything you have achieved. The transmission fell silent as Rodriguez considered her words. Sarah could see him weighing options, calculating advantages, trying to find the trap in an offer that seemed too good to be true. Finally, the rebel leader spoke. Sun Tzu also wrote about the importance of keeping faith with your allies and honoring agreements. He did, the Queen acknowledged. Then I want guarantees, formal treaties, oversight mechanisms, and I want Earth to vouch for the integrity of any agreement we reach. Sarah stepped forward. General, I've spent months working with Queen Zephyria. She has honored every commitment she's made to humanity. I believe her offer is genuine. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Then perhaps it's time to stop fighting and start building something better. As the two sides began negotiating the details of what would become known as the Terminus Accords, Sarah reflected on how a 2,500-year-old book had changed the course of galactic history. Sun Tzu had never imagined his words traveling to the stars, but his timeless wisdom about conflict, strategy, and human nature had proven universal. The art of war had indeed started as a weapon, but in the hands of a wise alien queen who understood its deepest lessons, it had become something far more powerful, a tool for peace. Sometimes, Sarah realized, the greatest victory really did come from convincing your enemies to become your friends.